Hey, Canteeners, welcome back to episode 91 of Culper's Canteen Cup. Man, there's a lot going on. As usual, Josh is worked up, man. He's worked up like Ryan Gosling. He's jacked, man. He's jacked all the way to the chest. We're going to keep it PG-13. We're going to try to keep it PG-13 in this one. So we've got, y'all can probably imagine what we're going to cover. Josh is tapping his notes ever so diligently, getting them all in order. I can't wait to hear what he's got to say. Uh, Man, we could cover 3 or 4 topics and talk for 3 or 4 hours. So we'll try to keep it at the wave tops and maybe 10, 12 feet below the wave tops. And I know Roger's got a lot to say about it. Our texts have been very colorful. And the first big surprise, once around the horn, because Josh wants to get to the red meat here. But one quick thing, we want to ask Josh and Roger and our audience, because we are mystified. Last we heard, Russia was just getting their clocks cleaned at Ukraine. And I was like, well, man, I mean, Ukraine's going to invade Russia next. And, Ukraine or Russia is going to become a vassal state of Ukraine, according to what I was seeing on the news. And man, I mean, what's his name? Ben Stiller went over there and shook the president's hand. And U2 did a concert in Kiev, or however you pronounce it this week. But then all of a sudden, Russia takes Severodonetsk, which is a big city in Russia. In Ukraine. I'm sorry. So, Josh, what's going on, man? Is Russia getting killed? Is this misinformation, or how did they take that city, man? What's going on?
Dude, I have no idea. The last I saw of it was, that the Ukrainians, they used all our javelins that we gave them and our, $40+ billion, and they were just absolutely beating the snot out of Ivan. Right. I mean, they were, dude, it was like, I can Tina Turner, man. They were just beating the snot out of them. And the last I saw, it was like, man, they're all the way back to basically their original line of departure in the Donbass before they re-invaded Ukraine. And so I was like, all right, well, that's a wrap. And then everything going on here in the States, I was like, well, nobody gives a shit about Ukraine anymore. They're good. They beat the Ruskies back. And the next thing you know, it's like, the Russians took that city. I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I'll screw it up. But it was like, wait, what? And now everybody's freaking out again. And here comes Uncle Joe with his with the hairs on his leg that turn blonde in the summertime. Say we need to give him some more money. And it's like, what happened? Like what happened to the point to where it was Ukraine was winning and now Ukraine is losing major cities. So who knows, man? I didn't. It's hard to believe anything that comes out of Ukraine right now. It was hard to believe anything that came out at the very beginning of all this with the ghost of Kiev and Snake Island and all that. So, dude, who knows what's really going
I
on?
didn't even know there was a war going on over there anymore.
All I know now is that is Becky can one of her birth control methods got taken away from what I hear yesterday. So let's see what Roger thinks about Ukraine before we go off the deep end.
I mean, it's what's going on in Ukraine, and there's different perspectives. You obviously have Ukraine that they're fighting for the autonomy of their country. Okay, so I don't downplay that. And when you see the information that comes out, misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, I understand it from a Ukrainian point. When it comes to our response, when it comes to the world response, dude, it's the same thing as this administration has been for the last almost 2 years. It's all for show. It's all just talk. They just think that, and it goes right in hand with what Luke said with, we had concerts over there and, comedians and actors. And it's like, hey, if we just puff up our chest and just act like, hey, we talk big words and Joe gives the angry whisper, they will be defeated. They will be defeated. And if he says that 2 or 3 times that, hey, man, everybody's just going to believe that and Russia's just going to back off. And what you realize is like Mike Tyson, said, hey, once you get punched in the face, welcome to reality, right? This is now reality. All the drama, the New York Times interviews, the, Sunday morning talk shows, we're gonna. Well, you have to do something. And what you're realizing is that at the end of the day, and I think this was our point at the very beginning. Well, one, Luke called it very early on where he said, this is going to be a very protracted war. I think he called it like one of the first episodes of this thing. And everybody else in the world, wanted to believe this thing was going to be over in a couple days, couple hours, couple weeks, whatever. But you're realizing that the Russians were playing the long game. At the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, there are soldiers out there fighting, and I don't care what your words are or whatever, but it goes back to kind of my stance from the very beginning with this thing, as we just sent, I think, another $1 billion over there over the week, if I'm not mistaken. But it comes down to either support the cause and get involved or don't. Okay, now we can make the argument whether we should be there or not, whatever. Okay, that you've got 50-50 both sides of the aisle on that. But this, we kind of quasi support, sort of, not really, maybe just a little bit, this half-ass support with just like blank checks that we're just writing every single week, it seems now, especially when you look at inflation and things that are going on at home. I'm all about, the international effort. At the same time, we also have a lot of domestic challenges and things like that we have to take care of. But it goes back to this entire administration. It's all talk. It's all for show. It's all big theater. It comes down to, hey, believe what they say, not what you see, right? Luke's favorite word, the gaslighting. That's what it is. It doesn't matter what you see. It doesn't matter what you experience. It doesn't matter what the reality is. Believe what they tell you. And I know we'll jump right in here. We've got the 2A thing. We've got the Roe versus Wade. I guess we can jump into Roe versus Wade first as I shoot it back over to Luke. But what makes me angry with all of this stuff is it's one thing when pundits do it, right? When you have political pundits, when you have talk shows, when you have editorials that put their political spin on things, I expect that. I know that. I know when I watch Fox News and I watch Sean Hannity, he's not news. Okay. He's an it's an editorial that I'm watching. It's his opinions, and there's going to be a political spin. If anything, that did come out of the January 6th committee, it's the fact that, hey, the media is hand in hand with the politicians. They are tied into these folks. With the talking points and everything, which we all know that. I mean, left side and the right side, it's all the same. What really pisses me off is when you have government officials come out and just downright lie. They downright lie. It's not even like disinformation. It's not even like, oh, well, we're just going to clip the end of the video here or take things out of context. They are putting out factually incorrect statements, and they're doing it intentionally. And it's right up there where we've heard it over the last week since RV, Wade went down. Abortion's illegal, right? We just made abortions illegal. No, that is not what happened. Not at all. But that's going to be their catchphrase because they're tying it into politics, trying to ramp this thing up for the November elections. But that's what really pisses me off, Luke, is I expect government officials, Republican, Democrat, Independent, like, hey, there should be some semblance of like fact in your statement. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? They come right out on the podium and it's just straight lie. Like, I watched Biden's speech and it was straight lies.
Yeah, lies and manipulation. Absolutely. I mean, I know we're going to really dig into this Roe thing, but I'm already seeing it. You guys are seeing it. I think the audience is seeing it too. Is that yeah, they're commenting, "Wow, we went into Roe quick." Well, what is it? What else is there to talk about? But you're already seeing it. You're already seeing the politicians for not necessarily both parties. I haven't seen the Republicans do it as much because this is like kind of a Pyrrhic victory for pro-life people, which I'll get into in a moment. But you're seeing calls to remove the filibuster, expand the Supreme Court, and they definitely want to ride this wave into the midterms. I don't know if that's going to work for them. We'll see. But this whole thing with Roe versus Wade, Roger's absolutely right. And our new listener, Jesse, wanted me to point this out. And it was a really good point, is that the biggest protest we're seeing right now, especially there was one in Colorado. There was an incident in Colorado where I think a church or a clinic, something got vandalized. Roger's right. Abortion is not illegal there anymore. That's not the point. This whole thing, and we're really going to delve into it because I don't want to go down the path right now, but I think this is sadly misunderstood. And like Roger said, the politicians are lying about it and gaslighting and saying, well, it's a woman no longer has the right to choose. I don't think it's that. I know Josh is going to really delve into this, so I'll leave it for him. But one thing I said, and I'm kind of all over the place, I apologize. Maybe I'll get my thoughts a little more organized the next time around, is that, you've got pro-choicers and pro-lifers, and I don't like either one of their arguments, to be honest with you, because the abortion debate is very ugly and is very nuanced. There is no black and white. It just isn't. Both sides want to go to one extreme or the other, which I think is wrong. I think it's nuanced. You kind of got to meet in the middle somewhere. But on the other hand, I think it's a sign of society, as a decline of a society as a whole, when we're very much not concerned with protecting a potential human life. Like Bill Clinton said, Bill Clinton, he said some good things, and not necessarily that I agree with him on this, but it was a very good way to say it. It's almost like don't ask, don't tell, man. What a great policy. But what did he say about abortion? He said it needs to be safe and rare. I think he said three things: something safe and rare,
legal, and
safe,
rare.
legal, and rare.
Okay, so I mean that's something that I can.
And pass me that cigar.
Hey now, okay, all right. That's PG-13 enough.
Hey, she tweeted about this thing. She's fired up too. So let's not forget about her.
But yeah, exactly. But I mean, Bill Clinton was, for all his faults, at least he was trying to find some sort of middle ground there back in the day. I mean, now we don't have anything like that. So yeah, I don't want to make this really a discussion about where I personally stand on abortion. I just think it's a sad state of affairs when we're not actively trying to protect and venerate potential human life, and then human life in general across the board. I think it's a bad spot on our society. I don't know if Josh is going to sleep or if he's concentrating really hard. I know he's had maybe a drink or two, day drinking. But so Josh, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm kind of scattered. So why don't you get me back on track here and tell us your initial thoughts on this decision that came out Friday morning.
So like you said, the whole abortion thing, it comes down like so I'll separate this into kind of, I'll bin it into two different bins. One, right, I'll get to my personal feelings on it later as far as, abortion as an act, as a method. But two, like, it doesn't matter how you cut it. The federal government has zero say in abortion, right? Abortion is not a right. It's not an enumerated right within the Constitution. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself said that Roe was very poorly decided. It was very poorly worded. Their argument that they came with, and it was almost the same in Casey, they played on this non-existent right, within the Constitution. And you go back and look at the Supreme Court as a whole has been very hesitant. And we're talking about the Supreme Court since its establishment. It has been very, very hesitant to grant rights that are not specifically stated or enumerated within the text, within the Constitution and the amendments. And so, they grounded Roe and Casey in, the method that they used was the same method that you would see coming from a legislative body. All right. And so there's a paragraph within the decision, and I encourage everybody to go read the decision. I read through it. A lot of it I didn't understand, right? Because there's a lot of legalese and stuff in there. There's a lot of words that, are big and more than 3 syllables. And I just, my brain capacity doesn't have that horsepower. But this paragraph, I was able to understand that, this straight out of the ruling, quote, without any grounding in the constitutional text, history, or precedent, Roe imposed on the entire country a detailed set of rules for pregnancy divided into trimesters, much like those that one might expect to find in a statute or regulation. Roe's failure even to note the overwhelming consensus of state laws in effect in 1868 is striking, and what it said about the common law was simply wrong. Then after, the sort of explanation that might be expected from a legislative body. And so basically what, Roe was, they legislated from the bench. Is what that paragraph says. They legislated from the bench in Roe. They used that same faulty reasoning in Casey, And so it was ripe to be overturned. It was ripe. There's a reason why Democrats, even when they controlled the legislative and the executive branch, never moved to codify Roe with a law, because they knew that as soon as they did, it would have been challenged. They knew that as soon as they would have tried to codify that with a law, it would have been challenged. They knew this day was going to come. They knew it. And it finally came. And so at the end of the day, people are talking about it's very emotional, both sides. One side spiking the football, and the other side is just going re on social media. At the end of the day, people are talking about women lost autonomy over their bodies. I got a lot more to say to that, especially after the last 2 years of people, that same crowd screaming for vaccination mandates, regardless of whether you wanted it or not. But talking about autonomy over your body, the federal government literally came out and said, we do not have autonomy over your body. That was literally what the federal government just said. You give it back to the states, and there's going to be a number of states who still have abortion legal. Even Florida, even Ron DeSantis has already come out and said that they are not going to, fully outlaw abortion. They're going to move to, it's probably going to be a 15, maybe a 20-week standard, just like Mississippi. And the case that even brought this to light was, Dobbs, and it was, they wanted the standard was kind of 24 weeks. Dobbs said, no, we're going to use a 15-week. And that's when the left got asked up and said, no, 15 weeks isn't good enough for us. We want more. And so that's when they took it to the Supreme Court. And well, guess what happened? You probably should have been happy with your 15-week standard, buddy. Because what'd you do now? It's like that private in the Army. I was probably that guy at one time. You just ruined it for everybody. Good. So that was my initial take on it. I have a lot more to say on it, but I'll throw it over to you. I'll kick it on around to Roger and see what else he has to say.
Now, I think with what Luke started out with, I mean, that's the point. It's not abortion in itself, right? It's not whether you believe in it, don't believe in it, yada, yada, yada. I think there's enough polling out there. I think when you look at the states, I think Josh, you hit it on the head. It looks like most of the states, well, I say most, a good number of the states are probably going to go to some 15-week, viability period. And then after that, it's got to be at the health of the mother and, welfare of the mom or whatever. You will have a couple states that, I think you said it very well, that you're going to have a couple states it's going to become just straight slaughterhouse, where, I think Colorado and there's probably one or two other states that will allow, DC, is going to allow abortions all the way up to childbirth. Right. So, which I think by any standard, I just don't see the majority of Americans agreeing with that. And I think most people, and again, maybe it's just anecdotal or whatever, but I want to believe that most people are like, okay, you know what? There should obviously be exceptions for incest, rape, that type of stuff. Obviously, the health of the mother is always there, right? No matter when, at that time, and families have to make that decision. They'll make that decision at the time, if something unfortunate like that is to happen. But I think most people are along the lines of, hey, viability, you kind of have those first couple of weeks. It's almost 4 months, man. I mean, you have 4 months to do that. And then at that point, hey, you kind of, because again, they've skipped over the first step. You did have a right to choose. You chose to get pregnant. Everybody, it's that personal responsibility we keep going back to. The Democrats just like to just, fly right over that piece and jump right into to step 2, step 3, step 4. And it's like, no, there was a step 1 there. And it's when you got pregnant. Okay. And again, not talking about the exceptions, just, you chose to get pregnant. And then the other piece to that is at what point, and to Luke's point, this is what bothers me with the left and the right. They're not even arguing the right points of abortion. It's like, okay, left, if you want to make the case for abortion, right, then talk to me about when does the baby have rights? And I'm not even talking about the extreme left. Like the extreme left, we understand, I know they accept that child does not have rights until they're born. So I know where they're coming from, but take the moderate left and say, okay, so then you tell me, moderate left, when does that baby have rights? When does that unborn child have rights? And nobody will address that. But back to what the real issue is, it's not abortion. It's about the Constitution, right? And people, one thing I have learned is that we all knew this. There are a bunch of idiots out there. They have no clue. And I'm not saying you have to be a constitutional expert. You got to be an expert in law in this. And like Josh said, reading, through some of the ruling, I mean, hell, you only understand half of it, right? Because of all the illegalies and all that other stuff that's in there. But like, people just don't even understand how the government works. They don't understand how laws work, how the Constitution, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. That's the Ninth Amendment. And if you go back and look at the historical text of that, retained by the people meant to the states, which was why it was followed up with the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Because back then the states and the people were seen as one and the same, which, I mean, we can make an argument nowadays that I think we have a little bit, that the states have just become too big and too bureaucratic from what the founding fathers originally, intended these states to be. But that's the whole point of this thing, is that they didn't take away any rights. It goes down to your states. And what's crazy is the places where the protests are happening are the states where the abortion laws aren't going to change. Like, why are you protesting in DC? Why are you protesting in California? Why are you protesting in New York? Why are you protesting in Oregon? That's not going to change anywhere. And oh, by the way, if you are in a red state, you're probably not doing as much. I mean, we did have some here at Phoenix. We had an insurrection, right? They actually did storm, I think, the Senate chambers, since insurrection is the big term out there. But, it comes down to, hey, you vote for your constituents or vote for your legislatures at your local level, where you actually have some semblance of a democracy as opposed to our national, level elections, because you have more influence and you can shape those communities, you can shape those counties, your cities, you can shape the states. That's the whole point of it. These people that argue, Josh hit it on the head. They're saying, oh, they took away our rights. No, they didn't take away your rights. They actually gave you your rights. You know what I mean? They gave them back to you. Luke likes to beat us up on this. The government gives you your rights. It's like they gave them back to you. They said, no, this goes back to you, because here's what's going to happen. And I meant to bring my book in here because I got it in the mail the other day, where Arizona, they put out the clean election thing, and you get a pamphlet. It's a guide. And it tells you every candidate, what they're running for, yada, 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 yada. And it shows you all the initiatives on the ballots and whatever. And you know what? 95% of Americans will just throw that in the trash. 95% of Americans will just, throw that in the recycling bin. And I was like, no, keep that, because I like to read through it, because those issues are going to come up on the ballot and you got to go vote for them. Right. And they won't, the majority of them. What I want to ask Luke is, and you kind of touched on a little bit, is it too early to have an impact on the elections? I mean, we know that the Democratic play, right? You have to keep this thing going to November, because you can't talk about anything else. I mean, you can't talk about inflation. You can't talk about gas prices. You can't talk about, food. You can't talk about, what happened with your foreign policy in Afghanistan, the G7 meeting. You can't talk about any of that stuff, because it's a dumpster fire. So you say, can we keep this going? But, one of the things I heard over the weekend, listening to some of the Sunday or Saturday talk show pundits, was the right, conservatives, Republicans, don't really see this as a big issue, because most of the people that are out there protesting and doing this stuff aren't even voters. I mean, I don't know that they had an exact number, but they're like, you know what? All these people are out there that are trying to burn shit down and, protesting and chanting. They're like, 15% of those people are going to vote. And guess what? Those 15% were going to vote Democrat anyway. So I don't know. Do you think there is what are the odds? What are the chances of the Democrats being able to play this through to November, and does it make a difference in the election?
I think zero. I really don't think it's going to make that much of a difference for many reasons. Because what did I say? What did I say 3 weeks ago? I think I was off by a week. You hear Uvalde in the news occasionally now, and we'll get to the other Supreme Court decision in a moment. But dude, people have forgotten about that. It's not going to make a dent. It might make a bit of a dent, but I don't think it'll matter. So real quick to what I was saying, I was so lost in my own thoughts the last time I talked. I mentioned Jesse and how we were going to bring up his point. It was what Roger just said. And I said, Jesse had a good point. And I started talking about Colorado. And it was exactly your point, Roger, that the majority of the protests are going on with states where nothing will change. In fact, it will get probably more permissive. But my whole thing with this, a lot of people are talking about the majority. And I'm going to get to a tweet that I promised this guy who tweeted to us. I promised him we would cover it in this episode, and it ties in very closely with this abortion debate. Now, people are talking about the majority, the majority believes this, the majority believes that. And, the Supreme Court went against the majority of what people think. Well, before I touch that, I should say that, liberals should be happy about this. If they stuck to the message, they should be happy about this because, again, they talk about the majority, the majority, the majority. Well, now it's down to the states. Okay. So if the majority in Texas, for instance, if the majority truly is for, your pro-choice stance, well, then this should energize the state's base, and they should get more, seats in the Texas Senate, possibly a change in governorship, so on and so forth. It brings it, but liberals don't understand that, and frankly, conservatives don't either. Is that the majority of the power? And this is why I love this decision, because the power goes down to the states, and I love that, and I wish it would go all the way down to the municipalities, the counties, and the cities, actually, but. Liberals don't understand that. It's like, man, you just got more power. If you really think you are in the majority in all the states, well, then this should make you happy because it should, mobilize your base, and they'll go out and put in more, in these small rural Wyoming counties or Wyoming, who has 2 Senate seats, just like California or New York. Well, maybe you'll mobilize these and you'll get, the super duper majority you think you should have, to where we can, because what these people really want, Josh, I think Josh pointed this out to somebody on Twitter. Josh just kills people on Twitter, man. It's just crazy because he comes at it with logic and he just shuts them the hell down. But he's like, what you people really want is another amendment. That's what you want, is an amendment, codifying God granting you the right to an abortion. That's what they want. And, I think they'd be happy with that. But instead, they want to codify it on a federal level and pretend it is in the Constitution and make it about, what, the 10th Amendment? No, not the 10th. They want to make it about privacy. What is that, Josh? Go ahead.
They wanted to make it about the 14th Amendment.
14th Amendment,
First,
that's
5th,
right.
and the 14th.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, that I'll listen to. I'll listen to your arguments on that. They're kind of weak, but I'll listen to them. But yeah, Roger, to your question, I really don't think that this is going to mobilize in any meaningful way. Could be wrong on that, but man, I'll go back to this. I really expected a lot more unrest, a little more violence from this decision. It's been the weekend, and there hasn't really been much. So I don't know how much this is going to affect everything. And Josh, do you have something to say before I go with this tweet, Josh?
No, what I have to say kind of feeds into that tweet. But real quick on the, on why we haven't seen the level of, like, because I was expecting, like, I was expecting 10 times the summer of 2020, violence, right? I was expecting it was going to look like the Third Punic War. I think part of it is because, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, is when they talk about the majority, 70% of Americans want this, 70% of Americans, it's like, no, 70% of Americans were okay with safe, legal, and rare. When you started pushing your woke bullshit, wanting partial birth, at birth abortions, stuff like that fence sitter crowd that didn't care, that was willing just to look the other way for the safe, legal, and rare, guess what? You lost those people. They're no longer there. They're no longer supporting you. And the people who might have came out in support of you, they're done with you. Right? When you're in front of the Supreme Court with, a white leotard on with red ink dye, coming out from between your legs, and you're talking about how you love to kill babies, you kind of lose that middle ground, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons, probably one of the main reasons, we haven't seen, the burning down of things that they said we would. Yeah,
Spot on. And I think that a lot of people, you guys both may disagree with me, but I would say the majority of people are actually pretty level-headed. They can get emotional. But my wife and I this morning had a very civil conversation about abortion. And, I'm not going to give her views on it, but it was nuanced. And it's like the meme that Elon Musk put out. Somebody who was slightly left of center, 10 years ago, the left kept moving the bar further left, and that person who hasn't changed a single one of their views, they're still left of center. Let's say Joe Rogan, for instance. Now they're right. Now they're on the right side of the spectrum because the bar has been moved, the Overton window, and the bar has been moved so far to the left. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, Josh. They really, by going, like you said, all their woke bull shifting. Josh said bull shifting. And that means when a bull shifts from a bull to a steer, that means their testicles have been cut off. So bull shifting. Yeah, they cram that down our throats. And now all of a sudden your moderate person finds themselves on the right. So good point, Josh. So let me read this. I promise this guy, and we're a podcast of our word. I want to read a couple of tweets. And this abortion or this Roe decision, I think the three of us, it has so much more to do. There's so much more to do with it other than just abortion itself, pro-choice, pro-life. It's about power. It's about the Constitution. It's about the people, so on and so forth. So I want to read this tweet. Somebody named T Payne, T-E-A Payne, that's funny, T Payne, said, "We are now under non-majority rule. The government is no longer of the people." Elf commented that Alabama and California have the same representation in the Senate is the real problem. Like the founding fathers never having predicted weapons that could fire dozens of rounds per second at great distance, neither did they expect such disparity in the size of the states. So one of us at C3 at our tweet tweeted out, "They absolutely did predict both. That's why they included the Electoral College, you absolute clown shoe." So Elf replies back, "Who in their right mind would design a system of government where 41 of 100 senators can represent only 21% of the population, can block anything they want? Biggest disparity in 1787 was Pennsylvania being 7 times larger than Delaware. Now California is 68 times the size of Wyoming. The founding fathers never envisioned that." And then very adroitly, Josh said, "You don't live in a democracy. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this." Now, this next tweet is the one I really want to focus on. Those two other ones, yes, but this is the one I said I would address. This person, Jim Sylvester, with the Ukraine flag in his bio, so he's going to have something very valuable to say. "But it is just for the Senate to be weighted in favor of low population, largely rural states. Just saying that is the way it is no defense of the imbalance. Unless there's a good explanation why the Senate structure and its control of the judiciary is just, the system is unstable." So, and it goes on, and I'd encourage y'all to go over, if you're on Twitter, look at the C3 comments and tweets and stuff like that, and chime in if you want to. But Josh, here we go again with let's get rid of the Electoral College. Here we go again with democracy is the way to go. Majority rule is the way to go. So you can talk about what you want, but what I'd like to hear, and I think Roger would probably have a lot of examples on this, is why pure democracy, which pure democracy, by the way, pure democracy is called anarchy. And I think Michael Malice would like that, but with a lot of caveats. So maybe some examples of why that would be a bad thing,
I think the easiest example is in a pure democracy, majority rule, LA County, not the entire LA basin. We're talking LA County and the island of Manhattan would make every single legal decision for all 50 states. Like that is pure democracy, right? So if you want the people who are currently, using drugs, running homeless camps, and shitting on the sidewalk in their streets, making decisions for everyone in Topeka, Kansas, and Tupelo, Mississippi, well, then fine, there's your pure democracy, because that is exactly what that is. And I think, unlike the tweet, I think the founders were brilliant. I think that they did envision this situation. That's why they included the Electoral College. If you go back, the first official census in 1770 The state of Virginia had 447,000 people. The state of Georgia, or the colony, I don't remember when they entered statehood. I don't think it was that early, right? Well, no, it wasn't, because the revolution hadn't been fought yet. The colony of Georgia had 23,000. So it was absolutely foreseeable and fathomable that they pictured, hey, guess what? The city areas, the rural, are going to quickly outpace the rural areas as far as population goes. So to say that they couldn't foresee that is, I don't think that argument holds water at all. Luke said I can't go back, and give a history lesson to everybody. So I'll skip a lot of the Great Compromise of 1787, also known as the Sherman Compromise. But
fast forward.
Yeah, I'll fast forward a little bit. But how did we wind up with a bicameral, however you say it? Again, I'm a product of Florida public schools, so how did we wind up with that 2-chamber legislature? Because the founders, in their brilliance, understood that the states needed the representation the same as the individual did. Okay, and we kind of talked about this in a couple of episodes, right, about the 17th Amendment. We kind of went back and forth a little bit of like, hey, the 17th Amendment, is it good? Is it bad? Does it need to go away? Because it breaks out how, why do we have 2 senators from every state, regardless of population? Why do we have 2 senators from Wyoming, which I still think, I think even as of today, that's our least populated state. The same as why we have 2 senators from California, who I believe is our most populated state at 30 something million. Well, because the state originally, the original intent of that was the state itself had to be equally represented in Congress. And so when people ask, why is it the way it is? It's like, I just, for me, it frustrates me. And that's generally why I come back with a lot of snark, is because, why are you asking this question? Why have you not read the Constitution? Why have you not read the Federalist Papers? Why have you not read the essays? They weren't compiled into the same way the Federalist Papers were, but why have you not read the anti-Federalist essays? But why do you not know this? Why are you opining on social media? Why things are the way they are, instead of going and teaching yourself how to fish? Right? Why are you asking people to give you the fish? Go read that stuff. People talk about it. It goes back to so many things that we've talked about on this podcast. Is people are like, well, why does the Senate get to appoint, judicial nominees? Well, the answer is right there in the Constitution. It's not as long as War and Peace. It's not that many pages. You can go and you can read that. Group of letters makes a word. Group of words makes a sentence, left to right, top to bottom. And it will tell you why. It's right there. It's in our founding documents. And so, these people, they want to change. And I saw somebody there's been so much dumb, on social media in general. But in the last 48 hours, 72 hours, like, it has been super dumb. Somebody was like, well, we can pass an amendment to the Constitution. All they have to do, Congress just needs to vote on it and send it to Biden for signature. And we'll have that amendment to codify Roe and abortion into the Constitution. And I'm just looking at that like, you are so effing stupid. And you're probably a registered voter, like, which is even the worst part. Luke, what you got?
Sorry, I was on mute. Just real quick point. Roger, what's the population of Phoenix today, roughly?
Like 6 million or something, ain't it?
6 million in the greater metroplex. Okay, Arizona got statehood in 1912, and Josh, I'm going to kick it right back to you. In 1912.
I'm sorry, 1.6 million.
Okay, so pretty big, right? 1.6. Arizona gained statehood in 1912. 2 years before that, 1910, the population of Phoenix was 11,000. My point is, stuff changes. Okay, stuff changes. Who knows, man? 200 years from now, if our republic lives that long, Wyoming may be more populous than California. That's my point. It's like, just stop thinking about today and what you did or did not get. Start thinking like a long-term planner, kind of like the founding fathers were, despite all their faults. So go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry to cut in on you.
No, that's a great. No apology needed. That's a great point. And they were forward thinking. It's the same thought process with expanding the Supreme Court. A lot of people are being emotional right now, and they're like, "Let's get rid of the filibuster and let's just expand the Supreme Court." And you're like, "Okay, well, let's go down that road for a second. What does that look like? What happens the next time the other party gets control of the executive branch and the both chambers in the legislative branch? Guess what? Now we expand the Supreme Court again, and pretty soon you have you don't have a republic anymore, but you have laws that are major laws that are changing every 4 years because you wanted to make a decision based on emotion and not logic, which both sides do this all the time. Both sides are emotional and both sides make decisions on that. Real quick, I need to correct myself. The first official census was in 1790, not in 1770. But the founders, they understood that the urban areas were going to grow quicker than the rural areas. That's the whole reason they put the Electoral College in place. And so and for the people who are not happy with the way the Senate is constructed, the people who are not happy with the amendments to the Constitution or what the Constitution says, guess what? The founding fathers also did in their brilliance. They put a process in there for you to change it. They put a process in there for you to amend it. And guess what? I'm sad to say, if you want to change the Senate, the only thing that the Constitution talks about as far as amending the Constitution, the only constraint, right? It talks about 2/3 of the states and all that. The only constraint you can go, and I'll give you a hint, it's in Article 5. It states, quote, "No state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate." End quote. So guess what? You can go and you can cry about it all you want to. You can do whatever. You can, just wring your hands about it. But 2 senators from every state. And the Constitution says you can't change that. So, representatives, hey, guess what? They decided that was the House, that was the chamber to represent the people. The Senate was there to represent the state. And that's why I'm a proponent of repealing the 17th Amendment. Get that shit out of here. Get back to the states. States don't need to be so subservient to the federal government, because a lot of that's because states depend so heavily on federal funds. If we could change the tax code, we could change that. So anyway, so that's my answer to that tweet. I saw you respond back on that, talking about, hey, we'd address it on the next podcast. So I wanted to throw that in there, and I won't give everybody a history lesson because Luke says I can't do that anymore. So I'll kick it over to Roger and stop talking and see what he has to say on all of it.
Well, no, and that brings up the other point to this, right? When we talked about it's not really whether it's abortion, could be anything. We're talking about the constitutionality of it, we're talking about constitutional rights, the amendments. And what's funny is, much like your tweets that we all follow, is that now, and I'm not making fun of them because I applaud anybody who actually tries to understand the process, right? You're never too old to do this. When we're young, nobody gave a shit. And then once you get older and you start understanding laws and how voting impacts you and the government impacts you, this and that, you start to become more involved. So I'm not making fun of that, but it's cherry picking. Like now, all of a sudden, these folks want to come out as constitutional experts, and they're constitutional scholars and this, and it's like, dude, maybe you should go back and read the whole thing first, right? Like you said, read the Federalist Papers, read some of the history of the Senate, read some of the history of the Congress, the House, and you'll kind of know the mindset of the founding fathers and why we have what we have now. And then to Luke's point, if you want to argue that point, absolutely, we can sit down and have that debate, right? Is the way that the founding fathers, how they set up our government and how they set up our processes, is that the way to go forward? Which again, like you mentioned, there's processes to that you can actually change this stuff. That's been my whole thing with the 2A. Hey, you don't like the 2A? Get rid of it. There's a process for doing that, right? Until then, shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear about it. I don't have to explain that right to anybody. Going back to what Josh is saying about the Senate, what people don't realize is that George Mason designed the House of Representatives to be representative of the population of each state, right? So each state, you have more people. Now, what people in California fail to see is, well, if we would have had this from the very beginning, California would cease to exist the way it does. Just saying that, right? They want to start it from like right now. They don't want to. They don't want to go back 200 years ago and say, oh, well, if this was enacted at the very beginning, like you were bringing up, and Luke was bringing up with the population of Phoenix. To counter that, George Mason was like, hey, we have to have a Senate. It's going to be a smaller body. It will be in the Congress, and it's going to be created to counter mob rule, basically. And that's why you only elect 1/3 every 2 years. They understood that that you're going to have these sweeping trends, right? I mean, world history is full of that stuff. I mean, you go back to World War I, World War II. I mean, you have these trends that are just sweeping that change, a country's history. It changes world history. And I think our founding fathers saw that and said, hey, we do need to provide some type of checks and balance and some stability. There will be change. There's room for change, but it's not going to be so dramatic and won't be so drastic, right? And so you have the House that is truly representative of the people, and then you have the state that is representative of this, or the Senate that is representative of the state, that is used as a checks and balance against the House. So I say with all these constitutional scholars, this not, and I none of us three are constitutional scholars. We just read the thing, and I can go back and read history. That's why it was created. But now it's you have all these folks that are just cherry picking. It's like, we need to change that. And now we're talking about term limits for Supreme Court justices. And now we're talking about packing the court. And, at the end of the day, it's like, no, what you're doing is you're cherry picking what you like and what you don't like. You cherry pick what you like out of it. What you don't like, you're trying to change because it doesn't agree with you. It doesn't agree with your opinion. And what you're finding out, and we've said this several times, there are a lot of people out there, and there's no other way around it. There are a lot of people out there that hate the Second Amendment. There are a lot of people out there that hate the Ninth Amendment. There are a lot of people out there that hate the 10th Amendment. And there's a lot of people out there that hate the Constitution, period. There is no other way to explain it. And when you talk about, 70% of da. Hey man, I tell you what, when I get on Twitter, I find the 30% that think Joe Biden's doing a great job. I know this is a little bit off tangent, but that's like, I see people talk about all this stuff, and it's these people on Twitter honestly believe that the state of our country is good. Hey, everything's great, man. Go blue. Right? And it's like, really? I mean, do you really believe that? There's no way you could possibly believe that. But anyway, back to the original point. You have these folks that are cherry picking, and at the end of the day, it's you just don't like the way our Constitution is. You don't like our Second Amendment. What's up, Josh?
No, I was going to say, they talk about changing things based on emotion. Ask the Democrats how Harry Reid's nuclear option worked out for them.
I know. I love that, dude. I love it. And we brought that up a couple of years ago. It's like, hey, Harry Reid started all this stuff, right? I mean, I tell you, some of this stuff, I mean, I don't know, you got Luke Stradamus or whatever the hell his name was. I mean, he's called a lot of this stuff for the last 2 years on this stuff. I mean, it doesn't take, here's the other thing to it. They're going back and now beating up the justices over their confirmation hearings. And again, it's these people, and this goes back to my original statement. There's a separation between pundits and papers and this and that versus politicians stating it. One, I don't know why you would ever ask any Supreme Court justice nominee about, it's the RBG rule, right? You don't ask them about how they would rule and this and that, because that's not how the Supreme Court works. For God's sake, it's like if folks would actually take 10 seconds and realize that, hey, look, the Supreme Court can't just sit there and say, we're going to make this ruling on this. We're going to make this ruling on that. You have a process that has to go through, right? And it has to go up through the states. And I think, each state is different. I think with Texas, they can almost go directly to the Supreme Court. In other states is different. You've got a process to go through. And the right case has to be brought up to the Supreme Court to challenge a ruling. That's how that process works. And that's why RBG knew. She knew this thing was going to be challenged. You just had to wait. You had to wait for the right, for the right case to be brought up. Now, in all fairness, we do understand it's like, there is these states will wait until it is favorable for them to bring that case up, right? I mean, you have groups out there on the conservative side and the liberal side that will wait till the judicial landscape is more favorable towards them to do that. But the Supreme Court just doesn't sit there and make up rules and just weigh in when they want to. The other big argument that they've been using is, well, this thing's been on the books for 50 years. And Josh, you hit it on the head. Well, you know what? Plessy v. Ferguson would like to have a word with you. Brown versus the Board of Education would like to have a word. So that's their argument, right? Again, they can't go back to the basis. Hey, like Luke said, you want to argue that this is within the 14th Amendment. Okay, we can, it's a piss poor argument, but we can at least argue that, right? You can argue that based on the merits. But don't give me well, you know what? This thing has been on the books for 50 years, and that's why it should just never change. It's like, oh, so is that the legal standing now? Again, you just have a bunch of morons out there that have no clue. And what's worse about it is they have no clue how it works, but they don't want to know how it works. They don't want to educate themselves on how it works. Right? As far as the left goes, and I'll throw it back to Luke for his final thoughts on this thing. Dude, I tell you what, Democratic voters, I was thinking about this the other day. They've been played. Now, we all get played by our electorate. I get it. But they've been played. Because you have had a Democratic president, you've had democratically controlled Congress, right? You've had this for almost 2 years. We knew the leak was coming out months ago. Now, again, I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs of what they could have done and this and that. Dude, you've had complete control, and you've had it before. You had it under Barry. Under Barry, you had 2 years of it. No, the Democrats know, the Democrat political party knows that, you know what, things are going to just kind of stay the way they are, but we just need to fire these guys and gals up because hopefully maybe we'll get some more folks to turn out during the midterm election. That's it. Because in the 2 years that you've had control, or it's going to be 2 years, they've done nothing. Your party has done nothing. They've done nothing to represent you, and everything they have represented you on, you've been on the losing side of it. And I tell you, it's, we've gone back and forth, and Josh brings up some pretty good points with this, but like even the right with the Roe v. Wade, I mean, that wasn't a win for pro-lifers either. I don't know how the numbers are going to shake out. I mean, maybe Josh is right, and, we save a couple lives. I guess in that point, every life you save is a win. So, I get that. But, he said it best, where some of these states are just going to become slaughterhouses. They're not even the right's not even, pro-life. No, this wasn't a pro-life victory, man. And I'm not saying we go out there and ban abortions and yada, yada, yada. I'm just saying the way that the people on the streets and on the ground are celebrating this or protesting it, it's for the wrong reasons. It wasn't a win for pro-lifers, because for every state like Oklahoma that bans it, or I think Oklahoma is the strictest. I think it looks like probably Texas, Florida, and Arizona are going to be about the same. You're going to have just as many states on the other side that just say, hey, open it all the way up. Take it all the way up to childbirth. So I don't know, Luke, you got any final thoughts on that?
Oh, just a couple. I've seen a couple of articles where I think maybe people are sending feelers out to see how it goes over. But, I've seen a couple articles that something to the effect of some states are considering punishing residents of their own states if they go out of state to get an abortion. I don't like that. I think that's BS. So that's where I stand on that. I don't like that idea at all. And again, maybe one of these days we'll do a podcast about abortion itself and maybe lay out a few things and get into the nuances of it. But I don't want to do that now. But I do not like that idea at all. I don't think that will happen. If some private company wants to pay for their employees to go out of state to get an abortion, whatever. I mean, fine. That's not what this is all about for me, this particular issue right now. One thing I did see, and I tried to follow up on it, I didn't see it covered in any mainstream, but something about Lloyd Austin questioning the validity of the decision. Maybe Josh knows more about that, and he can cover that. I was on Twitter a second ago because Roger was boring me while he talked, and I saw that somebody joking. I was not bored at all. I saw this. I was looking for another tweet, but somebody already called Josh a Nazi. I think that's awesome. For tweeting something that Jesse Kelly said. That's funny. Somebody called you a Nazi, Josh. So congratulations. Jeez. So one thing I was looking through Twitter because I was going to bring up a point that, man, people are really going after Clarence Thomas, and there are some really vile things being said about Clarence Thomas because, ding ding ding, he's black. And boy, oh boy, I was looking for something. I was reading through this thread, and I was just like, man, these people are racist, and they're all pro-choicers, those types of folks. So I commented, I was like, wow, you guys are really showing your ass. I didn't say it that way, but I was like, wow, kind of saying the quiet part out loud, aren't you? And I was looking for that where I said that, and a couple people liked it, and it's gone. So I think they deleted either Twitter or the owner of that thread deleted it. But man, I'm telling you, true colors are really coming out, and it's disgusting, man. It's really gross. I mean, they're just throwing out the N bomb, all this stuff. It's pretty gross. So, Josh, first off, couple things, then you can kick off the Second Amendment. Maybe one last thing about abortion if you want. But first off, like we said about the violence and the incidents, why do you think there hasn't been more? I was expecting more. You were expecting more. So why do you think there isn't any? Do you think it's just not that emotional of an issue? Do you think people are burnt out? You think people are still remembering the summer of love? I mean, why do you think there's not more? Are we too close to, 0 hour on this? Is it going to get worse as time goes on? I don't know. So maybe talk a little bit about that, man. And then maybe get into the Second Amendment.
So to immediately answer your question before I get lost in thought is, again, like it's like I said earlier, I think part of it, what you said, I think has something to do with it, but the other parts of it is, dude, I think there are a lot of people who look the other way on abortion, right? They kept that, okay, it's safe, legal, rare. It's not for me, but I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm just going to look the other way. And so, they were good with that. Maybe maybe every once in a while they would make a comment about it or something like that. Again, until you jumped up there and you started walking around with your, quote, I've had 21 abortions t-shirt, and, you walk around, with your pink, your pink pea hat on, sitting in the Senate causing an insurrection. And a lot of people, when you talked about, the folk, they started pushing for, well, I should be able to abort my baby. Even talking about infanticide, right? I mean, there is a push. There was articles out on, well, it should be legal even after birth for a certain time period, right? And it was like, you lost that middle ground. You lost those fence sitters. You lost those people who were like, well, it's not for me, but I'm not going to tell you no, that, you shouldn't do it. But then you came out and you're like, well, I should be able to do it, up to, and even, immediately after birth. And you're like, what? Are you serious? That is not a civilized nation. Like, it's just not. I don't, and again, get away from the legal aspect of it and get into the morality of it. It's like you lost a lot of support when you did that. It's the same thing with it's kind of a little bit off topic, but in that same vein, I mean, you kind of did the same thing, when same-sex marriage became a thing back in the 90s, when it really started gaining ground. A lot of folks, for the most part, I don't really remember anybody that I know of who were very much against it, other than, you had some very far right Bible thumpers who were, it's like, no, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and, blah, 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 and grr. Right. And you're like, okay, dude, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. If you want to, marry somebody of the same sex, I don't give a shit. Whatever makes you happy. But now you see it, and I kind of said this in my, in the blog I posted, but now you're demanding the right to talk to kindergartners about, being trans and, being the other gender, that they're not, stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, well, you just ruined it for everybody else, Carl. Right. And so I think the pro-choice crowd, I think they pushed too far. And a lot of people who would have been in support of them are going to take a step back and be like, you know what, I can't get on board with the minute before birth abortion. Like I can't do that. And so I think that's why Roger brings up a good point too, man. Dude, you know what the heat index is right now across the country? Man, it's effing hot. Like people aren't trying to get out in the streets right now. It's, those who do, man, those are your true believers, right? Everybody else who's kind of like on the fence, who's like, man, I get what you're feeling, but bro, it's kind of hot, man. Those aren't the true believers. It's only the true believers out there in the street right now. And so, but again, my last couple of thoughts on the Dobbs decision and overturning a Roe v. Wade. It's important to note that it was not a 6-3 decision overall. It was really a 5-4. John Roberts did vote against, again, with the decision, with the majority in the decision, yes, that in Dobbs, but he voted no on overturning Roe v. Wade and KCV Planned Parenthood. So there's a distinction there. But at the end of the day, the whole my body, my choice, crowd, it's like you just spent the last 2 years telling me that I needed to be fired. I needed to be excommunicated from, my neighborhood, that I wasn't allowed, I shouldn't be allowed to, to have custody of my kids, etc., because I wouldn't take your shitty vaccine, which has come out now. And, everybody knows, everybody's read the Pfizer documents, or at least I hope they have, so your whole, like, I should be able to make healthcare decisions for myself thing, that you completely lost everybody on that. So, and that's a great point, Luke. I'm glad in a moment of clarity that this nation, with as much division that is going on in the chasm between, us and ideology, we were able to come together for a brief moment, and agree on two things. One, what a woman is. And two, that men cannot have babies and can't say shit about abortion. I'm glad that we were able to do that as a nation in such a divisive time. Who says miracles never happen? Get out of here. This is America. Nothing, you know what? Like you said, Bill Clinton said some good things. There's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed by what's right with America. Hell yeah. Damn, Bill. And that gets me into, God, my favorite amendment. My favorite amendment, the second, because it protects all others. And the judicial brilliance of Justice Clarence Thomas, who people are out there calling him all sorts of epithets. I mean, just racial epithets. Dude, like you said, Luke, it's disgusting. But then again, we've been all over the world. And I will tell you, I'm here to tell all our listeners who may not know this, the most racist people on the planet I have ever met. And granted, I haven't been to Australia yet, and I haven't been to Antarctica, but I don't think there's a whole lot of people there. The most racist people I've ever met is a white leftist. Specifically, a white female leftist. Most racist person on the planet, hands down, without question. So they're the ones out there calling Clarence Thomas names that they shouldn't be. Sounds like a rap song. Sounds like Jay-Z's lyrics. Anyway, so everybody knows the Thursday, day before the abortion ruling dropped, the New York Rifle and Pistol Association v. Brune, who was the New York Attorney General, it dropped, or New York Attorney General and New York Police Chief, something like that. I forget which one Brune actually was, but basically, it came out. I don't know if you guys got a chance to check out some of the language in this. It was absolutely amazing. I kind of joked around a little bit, and it's like Clarence Thomas got 3rd-degree burns from writing this fire ass opinion that he dropped. It was absolutely amazing. He managed to tie in the 14th Amendment. He tied in the Dred decision. He obviously referenced Heller and McDonald. Like it was absolutely sheer brilliance. And so for those of you who might not be familiar with it, the New York, there's a couple other states. Maryland's one of them because we all dealt with this. they have a proper cause clause into you cannot get a carry permit, to carry a handgun, unless you show proper cause, right? And you have to fall into one of these, 4 or 5 bins, right? You got to be a judge, or you got to make large deposits of money, and you don't want to get robbed, blah, blah. Well, they said, no, anybody just can't go get one just because they want to be able to defend themselves. And, so real quick before I kick it to Roger, I want to just go over some of the language that was in the decision that really cements the Second Amendment, and it speaks to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about before on the podcast, and some of the stuff Luke and I kind of gone back and forth on a little bit. They talk about the this 2-part approach that Heller laid out, and it talks about how this 2-part approach is really BS. Right? So the lower courts use a 2-step framework when ruling on Second Amendment cases. That first step is, quote, being the text, history, and tradition of an amendment. That's what they look at. And then the second, they look at the restrictions, and that relies on, data, let's say, gun violence and other concerns and blah, blah. All right. Well, Clarence Thomas came out and said, despite the popularity of this 2-step approach, it is 1 step too many, meaning that all you need to do to determine someone's to look at the Constitution and say whether, it's a right or not, is being violated, is the text, history, and tradition, right? There's a long tradition of people carrying firearms in this country, a very long tradition from day one. We didn't defeat the British by talking to them. We defeated the British by shooting them. And it was the plaintiffs in the case, the New York State did not do themselves a whole lot of favors, because they argued. They brought up 3 main points where they're arguing, and we actually listened. I remember Roger and I listening to some of the oral arguments and talking about it a little bit. And I will say the New York Rifle and Pistol Association lawyers, we heard them, we were like, man, this guy, like, they are not making a great case. Like, they're going to get their ass handed to them a little bit. So thankfully, but they brought up one of the points that they brought up, that New York State brought up, was they talked about some of the restrictions in the Western territories at the time, right? And we're going back, to the 1800s, and you're like, did you watch Tombstone the night before? And you're like, oh, well, Verzer Earp, said you can't carry a gun in town. So, that's an example of a restriction in the Wild Wild West. Like, are you serious? You use that as an argument on why people shouldn't be allowed to carry guns in public? The West? Did you not watch 1883? I recommend you go watch it. Like, that's like they kind of, much like the abortion folks, they kind of did it to themselves on this. So real quick, a couple more quotes, and then I'll kick it over to Roger to get his time. Quote, individual self-defense is the central component of the Second Amendment. Self-defense is the central component of the Self-Amendment. Quote, it is undisputed that petitioners, the 2 gentlemen from the state of New York who sued, ordinary law-abiding adult citizens are part of, quote, the people whom the Second Amendment protects. So when the Second Amendment talks about the people's right, they are talking about your ordinary law-abiding citizens. That is who the people are. All right, for those people out there still confused. Quote, nothing in the Second Amendment's text draws a home public distinction with respect to the right to keep and bear arms, and the definition of bear naturally encompasses public carry, right? It goes back to what Scalia said. The Second Amendment, the Constitution says what it says, and it doesn't say what it doesn't say. And then constitutional rights are enshrined with the scope that were understood to have when the people adopted them. So that means, right, with this whole, like, modern, they couldn't envision AR-15s, and they couldn't envision this, and this, and this. It doesn't matter. Again, they envisioned change. They knew it was going to come. That's why they wrote it the way they did. And the last one, and then I'm going to kick it to Roger. Quote, we know of no other constitutional rights that an individual may exercise only after demonstrating to government officers some special need. That is not how the First Amendment works when it comes to unpopular speech or the free exercise of religion. It's not how the Sixth Amendment works when it comes to a defendant's right to confront the witnesses against him. And it is not how the Second Amendment works when it comes to public carry for self-defense. End quote. Clarence Thomas is going to go down as one of the greatest Supreme Court justices of all time. Roger, what you got?
It goes back to what you said with Scalia. I mean, at the end of the day, it goes back to what the Constitution states, period. That's it. I mean, it's a short argument. When you hear the Manhattan DAs, I'm reading it's a political argument or article, and they're like, oh, well, that means that a lot of people in Manhattan subways are going to be carrying weapons and this and that. Yeah. Guess what? Criminals were already carrying them, right? It's not like all the criminals, now, oh, we can all leave. They were already carrying them. Hey, right now, you've just given back, people's rights to actually defend themselves. Hey, maybe I can ride the subway now, because I worked, late last night and it's 11:30 and I got to take the A train or whatever the hell they take up there. Maybe I'm not so scared now. Maybe I can defend myself. Granted, that wasn't the original context of the Second Amendment, but it just goes back to when you hear these arguments from the left and the right, and I don't understand, like, dude, the rights, we did listen to that one and it was the abortion piece. I mean, it was atrocious, man. Like the argument from the conservative side. I mean, I was like, wow, you are not helping yourselves. Unfortunately, a lot of the justices were kind of prodding, and it just really comes down to, hey, man, this is what the Second Amendment states. Like, I shouldn't have to prove any of that. And to go along with what you were just saying, it makes the Second Amendment inferior, according to the left's perception of it. It makes the Second Amendment inferior to all the other amendments. Now, what I do want to bring into the conversation, and it's a little bit of a tangent, because conversely, you had the gun control bill that just passed, right? So I guess we can go around the horn with this, and Luke, we can get your thoughts on the 2A and then the gun control bill. So one, I'll put it up front. The gun control bill that passed will not save one life. Not one. I read through the whole thing. I think Josh has read through the whole thing. I'm pretty sure Luke is at least, read through a lot of it. And it's a couple of things that I was a little kind of confused on. So one, I didn't know that juvenile records were not in the previous checks. Normally, once you're fingerprinted, they populate no matter what your age is. Unless, and there's some, I'm only familiar with Arizona, unless you can go, because like in the Arizona courts, you can go have your record suppressed, you can go have them erased, yada, yada, yada. But it's a process, right? I mean, it's not like you just write a letter or, hey, I'm 18 now, we expunge these things. They're on there for forever. So I don't know how it is state to state. My assumption is probably places like California, maybe there's an automatic, hey, when you turn 18, they expunge them or whatever the hell they do. So it really opened up juvenile records to the background checks if you're under 21, which I don't have an issue with that at all. Again, I thought they were already there. If you committed murder when you were 16 or whatever, that should probably prevent you from owning a weapon. The close relationship, that fell under Lautenberg. That was already in existence. Lautenberg was like, hey, domestic violence or boyfriend, girlfriend like relationship. And of course, the local DAs can expand that how they want to or whatever, but that was already in existence. And really giving money and incentives for states to impose red flag laws. And I guess that's where I want to take this conversation a little bit. And we've talked about it before, and Josh brought up some points with who decides. And then over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of gone back and forth to DeSantis in Florida. And I know he's reached out via, Twitter to be like, hey, DeSantis, what's going on with the red flag laws down there? He wasn't in office when they passed that, but from what I can see, he hasn't done anything to remove that either. So I guess, I'll kick it over to Luke, his thoughts on the 2A. And your thoughts on the gun control bill, and then any thoughts on the red flag laws and, your due process with that.
Well, first of all, I think that I'll address that, but let's go back to 2016, early 2016, when Roger was all over the Trump train. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. And then I started to see the light. And I remember, and I keep waiting for him to pop up in my Facebook memories, where I started saying, you morons got to realize this is about the Supreme Court. When he finally got the nomination, people were like, I just can't vote for him. These Republicans saying that because they wanted Jeb, ! To be the nominee or Ted Cruz or whatever. I was like, you people got to stop it and realize this is about the Supreme Court. And look what happened. Look what happened. Bad Trump. Bad. Bad. You can say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but he got those seats on the bench, and that's one of the reasons we got those decisions we got, which I agree with both of them. Put it to you that way. Got no problem with the New York rifle, whatever it is. We're going to post all these some of the sources we're using. We're going to start posting on our blog the same day that the episode comes out. So you can head over to culperscanteencup.com and look for yourself on what these sources are. We're going to post the decisions themselves so you can read it if you want to, just so you know we're not totally full of crap. So we'll be posting a few of those. So yeah, I and this is one thing, and we'll go down this road one of these days. Josh is like, I'm not voting for this guy. Got to vote your conscience. And I understand what Josh is saying, but at the same time, there is a bigger picture involved. With Supreme Court nominees and things like that. Not that McCain or Romney would have put up better picks, but I'm just saying there's always something to consider. Red flag laws. I think the big problem with that is lack of due process. Correct? I mean, that's the problem, is lack of due process. If there was a due process that didn't resemble a FISA court or something like that, because come on. I think we're all in this pretty much the same page of the Patriot Act and things like that. In the heat of the moment, back then, not being as educated as I am now, you guys have always been as smart as you are now, which is saying a lot. But I was like, yeah, Patriot Act, yeah. Dude, it's not good. I mean, that eliminated due process on a lot of different things. So anyway, I understand where you guys are on red flag laws, but I am all for some sort of due process on, and I know that would flood the courts, but it may, people acting on emotion. Exactly right, Josh. People may disagree with even that. Hey, you're suspicious about your neighbor. Okay, you report them, and then they have to, that I don't know. There are problems with it, right? There's problems with it. But maybe there would be a punishment for falsely accusing someone. I don't know. But the red flag law, my problem with it is, again, that lack of due process, lack of being able to face your accuser. That's a big one too. And I think the accuser in that case, if somebody reported Josh as being unstable because you think he's a Nazi, so they take away Josh's guns. If there were red flag laws in North Carolina, if Josh had any guns, you wouldn't face your accuser, the person who called you a Nazi. You'd face the state, which I don't think is right. I think you should face the person that accused you of being a Nazi. So anyway, that's where I stand on red flag laws. Josh, I know you probably have a lot more to say about it.
I do, but I don't want to rant and be angry for 20 minutes. Again, nobody wants to hear that. The red flag laws, that's my biggest problem with red flag laws, right? You pointed out is there's a lack of due process. And I'm going to pick on my home state, here for a minute. And Ron DeSantis is, Florida's red flag laws, they were passed prior to him coming to office. But the way, I'll use Florida as an example. I'm not an expert on other states and stuff, but I read a lot about Florida's. Is, let's say somebody accuses me of something, and they decide, they're like, what, he shouldn't have guns because he ranted for 20 minutes on a podcast, and it's like all I heard was angry man saying things that hurt my sensitive feelings. Right. So they get a lawyer, they go to a court, they go petition a judge, and the judge can make the determination, doesn't even have to talk to me. I never once, I can be denied the opportunity to say, no, that's not what happened. Right. It's the two sides of every story. It's like a parent, right? Your kids come and, well, she hit me. Well, he hit me first. Like, that's not even, it's like, she hit me. And then you yelling at your other kid saying they're grounded before you even get their side of the story. You don't know what happened. And so that's my biggest problem with it, is that they get to go ahead and, send a popo to your house. And for those of you who don't know, popo's a term for the police that we use in the Deep South. And, they get to take your guns away. And then once you get your court date, which, it might probably not going to be that day, probably not going to be the next day, you get to go to court and you get to say, okay, well, then you get to present your side of the story. And then if the judge decides, if the judge deems that, okay, you can have your guns back, well, you'll get them back when you get them back. It might be a week from them. It might be 2 weeks from them. It might be 3 weeks from then. And how is that okay? How is that okay when you turn around and you look at due process under the Constitution? It's not. Red flag laws violate due process. And this is my biggest issue with one of my biggest issues with this bill that just got signed. And, Roger and I, we had a little bit of an animated, back and forth over text on this. Is, some people kind of shoulder shrug this, but this is a big deal because it expanded red flag laws. At the federal level, again, we just got done talking about Roe v. Wade and federal government overreach, red flag laws. I feel like that's government overreach again. So the federal government has decided to say we're going to go ahead and take away your due process, right? Because we're basing it on emotion, and a lot of it has to do with mental health. Okay, not one of the mass shooters who was actually either on psychotic drugs or antipsychotic drugs. We talked about those SSRIs. And not one of them who was actually seeing a mental health advisor or mental health expert, a behavioral health expert, whatever, at the time. Not one of those mental health officials, not one of those doctors came forward prior to something happening and said, hey, this person may have an issue. We may need to go ahead and see if they own firearms. Right? Not one. So what did this law do? What did this bill do? What shooting in the United States would this bill have stopped? Which one? Not one. It wouldn't have stopped any of them. And it goes back to there's going to quickly become a time. This is the door that is opening. Right? They haven't walked through it yet, but they're going to. This is the door that is opening that, has anybody had one of their doctors ask, do you own firearms yet? Either one of y'all? No? It's coming. Because this is the door that opens. Now, well, we have this federal law now that your doctor's going to have to ask you, do you own firearms? You want to go see a behavioral health specialist? Oh, you're going through a divorce. You're just, you're having a hard time with something. You're a veteran with a little bit of, post-traumatic stress, or you're a veteran, you're like, hey man, I just need to chat with somebody real quick because I'm going through a difficult time in my life. Oh, okay. Yeah, not a problem. Hey, fill out this form. Here's all your address, all this stuff. Hey, you own firearms? Oh, you own firearms? All right, man. I got to let your local sheriff know. That's where we're headed. And that's my biggest issue with this bill. That is the issue with it. They know they can't get through the Second Amendment. They know they can't get your guns from that. Especially now, now more than ever, right? And I know the ruling came out, I think the day after Biden signed that bill, on Wednesday, I believe. But they are absolutely 100% going to put the full weight of the federal government behind red flag laws now, because they know that is the way they will get them. That is the way that they will continue to chip away and eventually take away your right to defend yourself with a firearm. That's my biggest issue with that bill. We may not see it in our lifetime, but if we don't, I promise you, mark my words, our kids will see it in theirs. All because people are like, it really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't say anything. It's just, it just gives more funding for red flag laws, and it gives more fun, whatever. And the mental health piece, again, it goes back to who gets to decide. Who gets to decide? Is it your doctor? What school did your doctor go to? Did he go to, to woke university? Man, that's going to be a problem. So the bill is bad. Red flag laws are bad. And I really like, Florida especially Ron DeSantis, to come out and explain why he hasn't moved to get those off of Florida's books. I know I get an idea why, right? It's political. The same reason that he didn't come out right now and say, "Hey, Florida is banning abortion." Um, that he's leaving that 15-week, 24-week, whatever standard Florida decides on in there. And maybe that's what he truly, maybe that's what Florida wants is, from the voters. Maybe that's what he believes in. I don't know. But red flag laws kill your due process, and it's an end around to take away your Second Amendment. So that's my thoughts on it.
No, and you're spot on. And the key with all this is due process. And I know this may sound like a stretch, but here's why due process is so important. And people forget about this. And we haven't talked about this in a long time. When's the last time you heard the name Anwar al-Awlaki? Right? You got to remember, Barry killed a U.S. citizen overseas without due process. Now,
more than one.
Right. You can argue, whatever. I mean, we can go down the road with this thing, but you got to remember he droned an American citizen overseas without due process. And oh, by the way, the courts ruled in favor of the presidency, and it wasn't just against Obama, right? They filed a lawsuit. The ACLU did. Al-Awlaki's father filed lawsuits. I think it got cleared up in like 2014. And they didn't say, the courts didn't come back and say, one, they didn't rule in favor of Al-Awlaki, and they didn't really say that the government was wrong. They basically came out and said that, oh yeah, the Alien Tort Statute, it doesn't really fall within those realms. So really the father not being a U.S. citizen, it doesn't fall within those realms. And really the only person who can complain about, the lack of due process is Anwar al-Awlaki. Well, guess what? That dude's fucking dead. How's he going to complain? How's he going to file a lawsuit? I mean, when you read it's another link we'll have to post up, Luke, because when you read like the decision on this thing, and this is from a news article, so it wasn't the actual, they just take excerpts or whatever from it. But when you read the judge's decision on this thing, it's like, are you serious? Like, you're not even addressing the core issue of due process, that you droned an American citizen without due process. That's the issue. They're taking it to a technicality and yada yada yada. And I guess the ACLU, I don't know if they were just paid off or if the government came to them and told them to shut the heck up, or it was kind of weird because the ACLU picked up the case after it was initially dismissed, and it just kind of fell off the planet after like 2014. But that's the importance of due process. When you say that, well, the left will say you're taking it to an extreme. That's not an extreme. That happened. Okay, that is reality. That happened, and that's what happens without due process. Again, tangentially, but it's like, it goes back to the red flag laws. Hey, you want to try that guy in absentia or absentia or whatever the hell it's called? I'm all for that. Hey, you give the gal a court date and time, and you want to show up and take your chances at court. Great. And if you can't make it, you don't make it because you're out there and you're a terrorist or whatever. I have no issues with that. But the administration, from what I can tell, made no attempts, right? If they're going to do that to a U.S. citizen, that just shows you the lengths that they will go to take away your rights. And I am by no means defending al-Awlaki at all. What I am defending is due process and the rights of American citizens. If you're gonna take away your rights, or if you're going to be punished or whatever, you do have right to represent yourself. Now, that's the thing, is what they should have done with al-Awlaki's case was actually, hey, emergency hearing, man, get this guy a court date. He doesn't show up. Okay, now we're rocking and rolling. Okay, yeah, I just posted. Now we're going to free the shit out of you, But that's the whole importance with the red flag laws, is that. From what I can tell, and long story short, I hope more people challenge this, because this is what needs to happen, right? It's the same thing with Roe v. Wade. It's the same thing with the 2A ruling that came out. It needs to go to court, where you're going to have states all over the place with this due process. I think with Florida, I don't know if it's like a 72-hour thing. Josh, do you know what the timeline is in Florida with the red flag law? Like, somebody complains, it's like 72 hours or 5 days or something like that. They can actually withhold or take your weapon from you, or is it longer than that?
No, the judge can order it at the hearing where they file the complaint.
Yeah. So that's the thing, and it's going to be all over the place. Where you go to places, again, your blue states and stuff, it'll be indefinite. Hey, no convictions. Your neighbor complains, and oh, by the way, you just lost your gun rights forever.
Yeah. And so in Florida, the judge, once you get in front of the judge and, you make your case, the judge can either decide to, go ahead and return your guns to you, or they can say, all right, come back in 12 months. They can extend it up to a year at a time.
Which is ridiculous. And I'm spitballing here because I get an immediate need, right? But, meaning like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. The problem is, hey, if you're going to take away somebody's gun rights based on something, then charge them with the crime. I don't have any issues with that, right? Charge them with a crime, convict them, yada, 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 due process. And then, okay, if you want to take away their guns, you take away their guns. But to sit there and say, well, you know what? We just don't think that, because that's what it comes down to, the judge. I just don't think that you should have a firearm for the next 12 months, right? That's the problem. And that's when we take it to due process and the extreme all the way up to Alaki. That's the whole point, is you have no opportunity to defend yourself. And the fact that they can take away your constitutional rights without you ever even being charged of a crime. Not even just charged, convicted, right? That's my problem with it. So I think what, and I was kind of, a lot of this stuff just skirted on the radar because when the Senate, and hey, fool me once, man. When the initial word was that the 14 senators backed this thing or whatever, I'm like, okay, it's a political move. The GOP has to be shown, doing something because of the midterms. So you pick 14 senators that are kind of in states that need that type of support. But then, there was some talk coming out. Scalise was trying to whip the House and get votes that they were saying, hey, this thing may not pass the House, because there was only 4 votes that needed to be changed on the Democratic side. I had to cross the aisle for it not to pass the House. I'm like, ooh, and I think I texted Josh on this, and I was like, wow, maybe McConnell's a freaking genius, man. Maybe he's like, yeah, we're going to push this thing through the Senate because I've already talked with, with the House, and it's not going to pass. Yeah, dude, middle of night. Next thing you know, it's like Biden signed this thing. It's like, what? What the hell happened? Dude, that shit got squashed in a matter of an hour. In the matter of an hour. It was like, I never even heard of any challenge in the House. I don't know what happened. It literally went, I heard that on Fox News and I read a couple things and on the websites. I was like, oh, wow, this thing's actually going to, this thing may not pass. And then I woke up and was like, oh, yeah, it's passed. It's done. It's through. What the hell? So, it goes back to the midterms, folks. I mean, you got to sit there. You got to get involved. You got to know what the issues are. And, elections do have consequences. Luke, you got anything else on that?
Oh, you got me worked up with the Anwar al-Awlaki thing. I mean, we talked about this on a podcast probably a year ago, maybe more. But yeah, I was in a conversation with some guy and he's trying to tell me, well, it was okay because 25 lawyers blessed off on it. I was like, dude, you are talking to the wrong person. You know how many lawyers blessed off on the Nazis' final solution for the Jews? Hundreds. They legalized it. So you're talking to the wrong person. That I don't care. And this guy that was talking to me was like, well, it's always, you don't understand. It's always, you don't have the access that I had. And it's like, bull, I'm going to make it NC-17 bullshit. Okay. Don't come at me with that. Folks that work at the NSA always love to come at you like that when you're in an argument. Oh, well, if you could see what I see. No, man, no, don't come at me with that. So yeah, man, your target, I don't care. Better, 100 guilty men go free than, one, whatever, what Benjamin Franklin said. The thing.
The thing, man, the thing.
I have a huge problem with the al-Awlaki thing. And I, as you were saying, we need to post that up. I found a number of different sources on that. So we'll post that up. And you're right. It was just, boy, that was a bad move. And even for Obama, it's amazing. I think that was the low point of his presidency, honestly. Overall, in my view, what you got, Roger?
But here's the thing about it, though. Play a little bit play off his book. The audacity of the administration not to even try to charge him. Right? They just like, No, I can do this. I can just go schwack an American citizen. There wasn't even like, hey, there's an attempt to, hey, we're going to try him or find some legal loopholes or this. Dude, that never even came to the consideration. That right there is the issue. It's like, hey, we're going to violate this American citizen's rights of due process and not even blink an eye over it.
Yeah. And the link you just sent me that we're going to post, I had that same one open, and I also had the ACLU's challenge to that open as well. So we'll post those up. So Josh, real quick, red flag laws and all this stuff. I found maybe this flew under a lot of people's radar, but John Hinckley Jr., who attempted to assassinate President Reagan back in the day, was granted full release from custody in a mental institution. What I did not know, what I didn't realize, I guess, is that he was actually acquitted of any crime by reason of insanity. So, I guess this is nuanced as well, right? It's like, if this guy's not a felon, what's to stop him from owning a firearm? Now, I guarantee he can't. I guarantee there's some legal loophole where it's like, no way, Hinckley's getting a weapon. Conditions of his release from the mental institution or something. But again, here's a guy who, attempted to assassinate a sitting president who is actually acquitted of any crime. But yet he probably shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. I mean, correct? I mean, that was 41 years ago. I don't know. It's tough. What do you think about John Hinckley Jr. Being released and his ability to own a firearm or not?
So, at one, he never should have been released. Period. I mean, he tried to murder a sitting U.S. president, and on top of that, it was Reagan. Like, come on, man. Like, again, it goes back. I kind of make a little bit of jest there, but it exactly for our YouTube viewers, Luke is holding up the great orator, a bobblehead of him. It regardless of which president it is, you don't get to try and assassinate a U.S. president and and then get released from jail in your lifetime. I don't think that should happen ever. He should have died in there, but he didn't.
Yeah, it's right? A bad precedent, don't you think, Chuck?
It's an absolutely terrible precedent.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, what did they do to John Wilkes Booth when they caught him? They didn't put him in jail. Yeah, they swung him from a rope.
So what if he goes to see a doc who says that he is now mentally stable? Does he get his firearm? Because he was never convicted. He was acquitted, right?
Exactly. Well, I don't know. Right? I think there are instances where, I don't think people in mental institutions or people who are, released from mental institutions, based on their own recognizance saying, well, are you still crazy? Are you not crazy? I don't know.
Well, in all fairness, he did have due process. I mean, he went through a trial.
No,
so,
he had due process.
I think you can make the argument that he never gets a weapon,
I mean, he had 40-something years of due process, right? And so, should John Hinckley get a weapon? I don't think so. But at the end of the day, that's not for me to decide. Right. And I know we go back and forth in there and Luke is correct. There is absolutely nuance in this, right? There's a lot of things that are black and white. That when it comes to constitutional rights, there are things that are black and white, and there are some things that are nuanced. Should John Hinckley have a weapon? I absolutely don't think he should have a weapon. But at the end of the day, that's not for me to decide. Let due process. If John Hinckley wants to, have a gun to defend himself because there's a bunch of, people out there who love Reagan and are, potentially try and, do what he tried to do to Reagan, do what, to him, then he can go to a court and petition and ask that question. So that's my thought on that. On Hinckley, I saw he got out. I saw he got released. It's kind of mind-boggling. Again, to me, that's like Alder James or Robert Hansen getting a release from prison. It's like they should not ever be released. They should rot and die in there for forever. And on that kind of in that same vein, not that Julian Assange is a Alder James or a Robert Hansen. You see looks like that the U.S. is going to get them, and bring them back. Man, I think that's absolutely terrible.
We need to do an episode on that because it's been around for a while and people have forgotten. We need to do an episode on that.
Yeah, I tell you, I got into a discussion with somebody the other day. They were like, well, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, are one and the same, and blah blah. And I was like, you shut that shit down right now. Julian Assange is absolutely not the traitor and the scum that Snowden is. That is just
one was a journalist, one was a traitor.
Exactly. It's like, dude, but they're going to bring Julian Assange is going to get extradited to the United States, and Biden, this administration, is going to put him in jail. That is going to happen, and that is going to be a damn tragedy. But we'll save that for another episode. So Roger, what do you think? Should Hinckley not convicted, and he's no longer in the loony bin? Should Hinckley be able to have a weapon?
No, and I think, like we said, he's already had his due process. I mean, I think you can probably chalk that up to, the ATF form, and hey, he's obviously been locked up for 40 years, mental health issues. I think any reasonable person. So I think something like that is, he's had his due process, and he never gets a weapon. And that's just what it comes down to. It's like, hey, if you want to take my guns from me or whatever, then charge me with a crime and let me have my legal rights. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what it all boils down to. With the 2A ruling, I'm kind of curious to see how this works out with a lot of these blue states, because basically what it does is it takes these may issue states and immediately turns them into shall issue states. So for our listeners out there that aren't familiar with like concealed carry laws, generally speaking, in states, you have shall issue and may issue. So shall issue is that the state is going to issue your permit, barring something that pops up in your background, yada, 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 that shows that you shouldn't be carrying a concealed weapon. May issue, it puts the burden of proof on the applicant, right? So one puts the burden of proof on the government. May issue puts the burden of proof on the applicant to show that I have to have a reason, or I need to present a reason for carrying a weapon in public, yada, yada, yada. So it's essentially going to take all the may issue states to shall issue states. So I'll be kind of curious. And there's going to be a million legal challenges to this because, you bring up, well, can you carry them in ballparks? Can you carry them in the subway? Can you carry them, a variety of other places? So I'll be kind of curious to see what the legal arguments are to both, supporting those and defending some of those challenges. But real quick, before we go around the horn, kind of last thing on my mind, Josh brought this up. I don't think we gave it the attention that it deserved because I just wasn't familiar with it at the time. But you have China's Belt and Road Initiative, right? That they started in 2013. It is now valued at over $4 trillion. Okay. The Biden administration trying to catch up to that. Josh, you'll be happy to know this. The Biden administration at the G7 summit now has decided that they are going to raise $600 billion to combat China's Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to raise $600 billion, right? And the U.S. by itself, and I'm reading this, the U.S. by itself would mobilize $200 billion in grants, federal funds, and private investment over 5 years. So we're not even talking about today. We're talking about over 5 years. So now China started this in 2013. We're 9 years. So 14 years into the project where China is already valued at over $4 trillion. So over 5 years to support projects in low and middle income countries that help tackle climate change, as well as improve global health, gender equity, and digital infrastructure. So that is that, dude, it goes back to the whole Ukraine thing. If it's a problem and you see it's a problem and it's a threat to our democracy, it's a threat to our national security, then go, jump in it with 2 feet, right? Do something about it. You're throwing $200 billion over the next 5 years when China's already been on this since 2013 and valued over $4 trillion. It's a drop in the bucket. Why even try? Why even try, right? So, Luke, I'll kick it to you, man. That's all I got, brother.
But Roger is the world heavyweight champion of this episode of getting me worked up. Let me tell you that right now, because, dude, yeah, thanks a lot, Roger. Jiminy Christmas, $600 billion for the United States' own Belt and Road Initiative, and let me tell you who's going to implement that. The okay, NC PG-13, the State Department. Okay, and we all know how the Lukester feels about the State Department, man. Those people couldn't implement their way out of a wet paper bag, man. And, it sounds to me like this Belt and Road Initiative is going to have a heavy dose of environmental, social, and corporate governance, the ESG BS nonsense. So maybe the same time we cover Assange, we can cover ESG, because that is a real problem. That is a real problem. I'm sure Roger's seen it. Josh has probably seen it in his field right now, and I have seen it as well. So, man, I'm telling you, that is, if it was executed, it's all about the execution in the end game, right, Josh? Josh's favorite thing. It's all about the end game. Let's execute it right, and let's have an end game. Which brings me around, to closing thoughts here. I mean, I'm really, I understand DeSantis, red flag laws, nobody's perfect, but I'm getting some Reagan vibes. And not necessarily that DeSantis is Ronald Reagan. He's the next coming. It's not that. I get some Reagan vibes like, man, people are ready for a change, just like they were back in 1979, 1980. And I think DeSantis may be that guy. Maybe in the next episode, or if Roger closes it out, he can tell us why he thinks that Trump isn't running. I'm not so sure about that one. I hope he doesn't, because I think it's DeSantis's race to win. And I don't think it matters who they put up against him unless it's Michelle Obama, which it probably won't be. So real quick, couple shout outs. Oh man, Carlton Zeus is lighting it on fire in South Texas, man. Dude's riding helicopters to work out, and then over to the Salt Lick barbecue to get barbecue meals. Check out his videos. The guy is just on fire. We're going to try to get him on an episode in July. That might be kind of tricky, but we're still going to try. The guy is just on fire, so go check him out. We appreciate him helping out the podcast. We got a new listener, Diego, who might like Carlton Zeus, but Diego's more into the narco corridos, Grupo Exterminador or Los Maitos de Sinaloa, or Comillo Norteño. That's Diego's speed, but I'd encourage him to go check out Carlton Zeus. He might like that. So thanks for listening, Diego, new fan. And last time I mentioned Jesse 3 times, man. I'll tell you what, had a difficult situation this week. It wasn't life or death, or the walls weren't coming down around me, but I was pretty discouraged and pretty upset this week. And reached out to a new listener, Jesse, and he really talked me off the ledge with some real good words of wisdom. And appreciate him listening, and appreciate you doing that. And Jesse's an expert on all things firearms, so maybe we can have him on the show if we're ever going to talk about some technicalities. So yeah, and he's more than willing to come on. He's even offered to buy a microphone, so it's more than I do. So that's all I've got for this episode. Josh.
All right, yeah, thanks, Luke. Hey, quick question. I don't know if you want to talk about it now or what, but your dad.
Oh yeah,
your dad thinking about kicking out a podcast.
Yeah, and I actually owe him an email. I just brought it up one day. He's big into the high school football refereeing scene. That's one of his passions. He's been doing it for 22 years, I think, long time. And he's an expert, and he knows a lot. And I was like, hey, you should start a podcast. You find a couple of your buddies, 1 or 2, and start a podcast. So he found a guy who's actually the assistant attorney general down in San Angelo, Texas, who's also a high school official, and he's got experience in the radio broadcast. So I think they're going to start it up. They're kicking around names. I thought a good one would be the Zealous Zebras or something like that. Or yeah, I think I'd be interested. You think high school football officiating may not be much to talk about, but man, there really is. They do have to follow some legal parameters, but as you could probably imagine, from the UIL in the state of Texas, they can't call out specific coaches or whatever. But yeah, so we'll keep you posted on that, and yeah, could be good for them. Their audience will definitely be bigger than ours. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, shout out. Hey, John up in the National Capital Region. Thanks for listening. I appreciate the banner back and forth last couple of days. A former coworker of Roger and I think Luke had already left prior to him getting in there. Hey, can't wait for you to retire. We're going to get you on here and you sit down and chat about some of the stuff you've been working on and see what's going on. Hey, big shout out to Wes out in Colorado. Thanks for listening. And Eugene here in North Carolina. So Eugene hit me up and he's like, hey man, he's like, I got an idea. He's like, I'm coining the 2022 midterms. He's like, I'm coining it, quote, something Democrats have to swallow. And he was like, what do you think? I was like, dude, I think it's fantastic. He's awesome. We all know him. I'm not going to use his nickname because then everybody will immediately know who he is. But Eugene, I appreciate you listening, man, and I love the memes. So that's two last things, and then I'll kick it over to Roger. One, did you guys see the little cartel monkey that died? It's like this year's Harambe. Like, why are we killing spider monkeys, right? Like, cartel members, kill yourselves, kill each other. Like, you killed the spider monkey that was all kitted up, man. He looked like little spider monkey, looked like Pouches O'Houlihan, got smoked in some cartel shootout.
That was sad, man.
It was terrible, man. It brought back memories of Harambe. So last thing, hey man, June's a long month. We got a lot of stuff going on in June, but I can't think of a better way to close out my birthday month, Donald Trump's birthday month, Flag Day, the Army's birthday, and National Bourbon Day with a big win and for pro-life and a big win for gun rights. A hell of a way to close out Pride Month, right? So hell of a way to close out Pride Month. So with that's all I got. I'll kick it over to Roger.
All right, I have to give a shout out. So I did bring a new listener on, Spence, been an Xbox buddy. I think you guys have actually played with him a couple of times, but he just picked up our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he's either lying to me or he tells me he digs the show and he's still listening. So that brings my grand total of new listeners to 1. Because Luke has he tries to hold me to every day. Luke's like, man, I got a new listener, and I don't know if he's just being passive aggressive, like, hey, I have to get off my ass to try to get some new listeners or whatever. So I have now brought 1 new listener to the cup. So big shout out to Spence. Keep listening. Hopefully some of our listeners out there share our stuff. I know some of them are a little bit reluctant because of the circles they work in or live in. And it's kind of crazy along those lines, because when you look at the Roe v. Wade decision, I kind of thought this, but I didn't really process it very clearly until I read a couple tweets. But man, there are like a lot of family members that are breaking up over this stuff, right? I mean, this stuff gets heated. But like I've said at the very beginning, when they talked about keep politics away from the dinner table, no, you need to argue about this stuff. Right? You need to have discussions about this stuff. You need to have conversations about this stuff, because this is how you educate yourself. There's no better way to educate yourself than to get into an argument and, oh, by the way, have to go back and conduct due diligence to support your argument or to support your stance. And then maybe, just maybe, if you're objective about it, you pull up some data and you say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm on the wrong side of this, or maybe there's some other things to consider, or whatever. So, hopefully, when you get the 2-way piece, hopefully when you've got the, with the Roe v. Wade piece, hopefully folks will go out there and educate themselves to try to defend and support their positions. And maybe they learn something about our government. Maybe they learn something about the Constitution. So with that being said, I know we've been putting out some more content, some more blogs on our website, www.culperscanteencup.com. Check out Carlton Zeus on Apple Music, or hit him up at his website, and keep your canteen cups tightly secured.